And we're live. Welcome back. Episode 2 of the PODCASTY. Yes, I've named it PODCASTY because it's kind of podcasty. My name is Mick HAYES. I'm a guitar player and singer. I hesitate to call myself a songwriter because I've met some songwriters, and what I do is definitely different than what they do. I write songs to get things off my chest. It's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So today we're going to deal with the number one question of musicians when they're interviewed. When did you first start playing? Now, this is usually an eye roll moment for anyone on the receiving end of that question because it really feels like it's territory that's been very well covered. However, for some reason today, I feel the need to kind of dive in a little bit deeper and get, some levity, I guess. That'd be the best way to say it. Levity to how I started playing. So we're going to go back to 1985. 1985, we're in the Cold War era. Again, avoiding politics, just kind of giving you a baseline. And my parents, who both played guitar, got me a Harmony, kind of a toy acoustic from Brand Names at Southgate Plaza, if you're from the area. So, Southgate, Brand Names, was a catalog. You went into the store. What you ordered came down on a conveyor belt. It's kind of anticlimactic, but it was, it's all part of the experience. So I started playing, tinkering around that time, very much the same way that Stevie Ray Vaughan did, because he got a toy guitar with little cowboys on it. Basically, this was my toy guitar. And I use Stevie Ray as an example because my dad was an SRV devotee, we're going to call him. He actually has Stevie Ray's number one guitar tattooed on his forearm, and he has a portrait of Stevie Ray on the other forearm. And I also mention that because the first song he ever taught me, the first song I ever learned to play, was Cold Shot. Now, mind you, that's really unusual for anybody that's ever learned guitar. Usually you're learning hot cross buns, but that came not too long after because they put me in guitar lessons. Now, the guitar lessons and me didn't go over very well because I started developing as a player on my own, based on what I was listening, based on what was being played around my house. And as I said before in interviews, I didn't like the feel of my guitar that they gave me. It was a toy. It was easy enough to say. And then my dad had professional guitars. So there were a lot of instances that I would play those guitars and, of course, get in trouble. So around that time, my folks also had decided to get divorced. I won't go into that too deep, but I will tell you that was also the time that me and guitar bonded. Because of what was going on. For some reason, it kind of understood me. I wrote a song many years ago. My music just understood me. It was kind of the crux of it. A lot of the kids in the neighborhood were starting to, get introduced to Nintendos and the Sega Master System, which really dates us there. But that wasn't for me at all. I had a Sega, but it just wasn't for me. The guitar, for some reason, gave me a voice. It gave me an escape. Now, before you start thinking anything like that my parents were fighting around the house all the time, that wasn't the case. As a matter of fact, I don't remember them fighting around the house. A lot of instances, I don't remember them being together in the house, although I've seen pictures of it, so I know that it existed. But because I took such an interest in guitar, somewhere along the way they decided, either it was decided or they gave me, by their own accord, my first electric guitar, which was the Dan Electro Silvertone, air quotes, amp in the case model. And again, because my dad was such a Stevie Ray nut, Stevie Ray had a guitar that was built for him by Charlie at Charlie's Guitar Shop, and he put lipstick tube pickups in that guitar. So it was a very Strat-looking guitar, white guitar, beautiful. And my dad robbed the lipstick tube pickup, which came in those old Dan Electro guitars. He robbed it out of that guitar, put it in his Stratocaster, and then put a cheap de-Harmon pickup in that guitar, and then they gave it to me with no amp, no case, no nothing. Yeah, if you could see my eyes right now, I just rolled my eyes way back into my head, because believe me, if I had a kid, I would do something completely different, but I think we all would. That's kind of the way the world is today. So I had this okay-ish 60s electric guitar I'm basically playing acoustically. And then they started putting me, like I said, in guitar lessons, and my dad had visitation rights on Saturdays. So after he picked us up, we started our visitation, with my guitar lesson. Now let me just give you a little bit of a picture. My dad was a car enthusiast, as am I, but again, story for another time. And my dad at that time had a gorgeous Cadillac. And he would pick us up, and the first thing you got when you got into the back seat was secondhand cigarette smoke. And then there would always be blues playing in there. So again, I'm getting my teeth in music. Now, again, we're talking 85, 86, somewhere in there. Michael Jackson, Prince, Madonna, that's what's on the airwaves. And I'm being exposed to, other artists that are in the blues category. And then my teacher, who's, teaching me Red River Valley and everything out of Mel Bay Book 1, eventually kind of gets a form of frustrated and comes out in the one lesson, I remember, and tells my dad that his guitar won't stay in tune and he needs a better guitar. Now, this was at Kepler Music Center, which was a music store in addition to, lessons and such. Later on, it actually became a studio too for a while. And I don't really feel like he was being a salesman at that point. I almost feel like he was kind of in my corner. And we went downstairs that day and began looking at the new model Squire Bullet guitars, which was, it was serial number E5. So that would have been either in 85 or perhaps in 86. I remember there was snow still looming in the skies. So it could have been, around the transition, the new year. And that was my first and second electric guitar. Now, mind you, first thing first is I have both of those guitars still today. That's kind of the first point I want to leave with you guys, that if it means something to a kid for you to do that for him, I mean, here I am, I'm over 30 years later, I still have those guitars today. And while they're not very playable compared to the, guitars that I have, it's still sentimental value. Something I don't have too much of most of the time. That said, here I am now with 3 guitars. I'm like the coolest kid on the block, right? But still, my parents, like I said, are getting divorced, and my guitar seems to be the only thing that I'm kind of adhering to. There's a lot of times that my mom had to put us with relatives, and my grandmother specifically, so that we could, have a babysitter basically, but, a better than a babysitter, at least because it's a relative. And I would always take the guitar with me, and I had a little headphone thing that I could use called what was that thing called? A Hot Watt. That was it. A Hot Watt. It was like a budget version of Tom Scholz unit, the Rockman. Anyways, so I would take this around to family members' houses, and I could play electrically, but with headphones on. And surprisingly, my hearing is still really good today. Knock on wood, and Lord continue to bless me and such. But anyway, that was kind of, again, that era of my life. Now, the funny part is I've always written poetry. And eventually, the first song I ever wrote was right around this era. And again, some of the timeline for me is a little hazy. But I'll tell you that my mom started dating a gentleman by the name of Frank Miracle. Frank was a piano player in the Western New York area. And he also played a little bit of guitar. And he played in bands, which was cool. My dad didn't play in bands, so it was a little more interesting to me, and I really bonded with him. Out of all the guys my mom dated, he was probably my favorite. He definitely was my favorite, and I still am in touch with him today as an adult. So at 11 years old now, my mom rents a piano for the house. So when he's over, he has something to play. And in the interim, also, he ended up teaching me how to play piano. And then he would also teach me things on guitar at the same time I'm learning from my dad, at the same time I'm listening to my mom play. And you can really see how this thing starts to grow. So I think it was that same year, although it could have been a year prior, I did my first talent show. At Our Lady of Victory, which was the private school that I was in. And I had a song that I had written by myself. And I was going to play it with a drummer from the neighborhood whose name was Chris Welch. And we were on stage, in the wings of the stage, and they announced us, and he chickened out. With his drum set on stage, he wouldn't go out. And I went out by myself. And this is another moment I remember very, very clearly. It's exactly like learning, Cold Shot for my first song. I remember going out on stage, feeling the warmth of the lights. Back then they were power lights, like 64s. Feeling the warmth of the lights in a black members only jacket. Another sign of the times. And playing a song by myself. And in my mind, it was a room full of applause when I was done. And it wasn't a situation that I can remember. There was no one who won. It was just a talent show you were showing off, But I'll never forget that moment that I was kind of fearless. And if people have ever asked me, did you ever get stage fright? Because I've played, in front of 20,000 people before. And I said, no, I got over that at a young age. First time I walked out on stage, I think I was 10, somewhere around there, 9, 10, 11, no later than that, because I know this, because at age 12, we lost our home. And that also meant that we lost the piano. And we kicked around Lackawanna, New York for a couple more years. And then I started getting into fist fights at school and all the cruel stuff that kids go through. And then we moved out to East Aurora, New York, which was really a good thing. But at first, it's, as a kid, it seemed really jarring. But at 13, girls officially became a distraction. And then by 16, girls were definitely a distraction, as well as cars, because like I said, I have this kind of car nut background in my family. Both my uncle and my father instilled that upon me. Accidentally, I guess. It's just, when you ride around in cool cars as a kid, it's pretty hard to get in the back of an Escort and, whatever. Nothing against the Ford Escort, really. So my first official gig, paid gig, was at 16. And at the same time, we had a event at our, like a battle of the bands at our local teen center. So that was in January of 1994. Crazy the stuff I remember. Can't remember what I had for lunch last Wednesday, but January 1994 was my first official. Walked out on stage where we had a band called Perpetual Utopia. I was not the lead singer. I sang, I believe, 2 songs. And we went out on stage at a teen night, and I remember everybody being like, we had no idea, man. You told us you played guitar. I was like, yeah, no, I play. And just to give you some kind of example of this, like I took guitar solos in songs. It was crazy. This was, again, the era of, grunge rock and stuff. And there wasn't like, crazy guitar solos. Like I took like blues and classic rock guitar solos at 16. I've got videos of it. It's not great. It's kind of fun to look at, but it's not great. Nothing I'd really put out there for you guys to enjoy. So then we did this first gig as same band at Victoria Lanes. It was a teen night on a Monday. I can remember all this stuff. It's crazy. Of course, it would be on a Monday because they had bands on Fridays and Saturdays. So they had a teen night on a Monday. And we actually got paid. And in my mind, It was like I had arrived, Now I'm making money playing guitar, and there's all this stuff, man, all the stuff that's important to you at that age, I guess. Then I got my first job. Whoa, I got all my own, independence. And I got my first job, and I got my first car. And again, things that are completely different now. You don't give a 16-year-old kid doesn't get a car. Even better yet, a 16-year-old kid, I turned 16 in June. I had my license by July. That doesn't happen anymore. I know that. I've heard that from some of my friends that have kids. So we play this battle of the bands. I got a car. You can kind of see where things kind of start to become, we'll call it a distraction. But music is still first, and then this job. So when I was working at Aurora Park Healthcare Center, sorry, I'm just kind of responding to somebody here. The way the world is today. So I have this first job working at Aurora Park Healthcare Center, and it's just money, it helps me. So I gotta get a this and I gotta get a that. My mom makes a deal with me. She says, I'm gonna get you a new guitar. So I, if I'm a good boy, basically, keep my grades up and all that stuff, and I get a new guitar. And crazy part is I don't have that guitar still. The funny part is I did find the receipt for it one day, which was really odd. I was like, why did I save the receipt in a box? So I get this job, and then in the summers of in between what that would have been sophomore and junior year, and then junior and senior year, I worked at Sears in the tire and battery department. So I was leaning towards being a mechanic. At the time, I was, like I said, kind of following in the footsteps of my uncle at that time. And I loved cars as much as I loved, guitar too. And then I went back to school, I think it was for junior year. And the guys that I was in a band with, we all decided that we're going to make our first recording. I got to laugh about this. Because again, my mother's like, you're not allowed to leave East Aurora, New York with your new car. And I'm such a rebel, still to this day. I loaded my gear in the car in the band, and we drove to Lockport, which is actually about an hour away, to make our first recording, which I still have actually on reel to reel. And my mother's like, we told her about it. She's like, oh my God, I'm going to kill you. But just goes to show, I knew what I wanted. Working on cars gave me the money, and we made our first recording. And again, it was 4 original songs. I'm going to keep that in mind. So there were a couple of bands in East Aurora that were all very talented. And at that time, like, we were playing house parties, and I don't know, it was a really fruitful time as far as what was coming out on the radio and what was coming out with MTV and stuff like that. And I had that interest. Nobody could take that away from me. And geez, I almost don't know how to say it, but it was more important to me than school. So long story short, kind of, sort of, that band breaks up, and I join another local band in the area called New Fiction as their bass player. And then those guys were nice enough to bring me into the high school band senior year. So I was playing in the concert band in the rhythm section. I was in the chorus. I was in the barbershop quartet. And I was also in the jazz band, mostly as either a bass player or a guitar player. I traded off with Andy Stack, who's still in the business today, and we're also in touch. And that took me right through to my senior year. Now, the part that I'm probably just going to kind of cut the edge of it a little bit is academically, I was not the best at all. Not even kind of. As a matter of fact, I had to take math. I took like math, general math, and then math course 1 just to get my math credits. And I remember the teacher giving me kind of, attitude one day, and I stood up in class and I said, I don't want to do this. And he was, what are you talking about? And I said, I'm going to count to 4 for the rest of my life, and that's it. And it was kind of a brazen, bold, but very true statement because he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the song's going to start. And he sent me to in-school suspension that day, and that was it. And the ironic part was many, many years later, when he came to one of my shows, he was sitting at a table close to the edge of the stage, and I reminded him of that story. And we had a good laugh and a beer. But that's it. I mean, I knew even at that age that that's what I wanted to do, but I was still kind of hanging around cars. Okay. And, we're going to get to that in just a minute. So, like I said, Perpetual Utopia was the name of the first band. That band broke up. Then I joined New Fiction. New Fiction brought, we had gigs that started to happen out like in downtown Buffalo. We were playing gigs as a band, which was cool. We were still teenagers. We played at a place called Bagels, Blues, and Brews, which is not there anymore. We played an event at the Market Street Arcade, and we played a bunch of grad parties. We played house parties. We were a teenage band with original songs and also playing covers. And because we had this cool dynamic of being in the high school band and the jazz band and all that stuff, that when we needed to play longer, we had songs we did in jazz band. And then we also, the four guys were all in the barbershop quartet. So, and I have a video of this where we actually started our show with Goodbye My Coney Island Baby in 4-part harmony. It's so odd, but it was cool because then we'd pick up instruments and just melt your faces. It was a lot of fun. So that was senior year. And then I got my first recording done, and I've got my first gigs where I'm, making money. And this is, coming up on 1997. And that's, when you put into perspective today what an 18-year-old kid is doing, they're sitting on the edge of the bed, playing along with some track, kind of shredding their faces off on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And I'm not downplaying any of that, but I had this kind of conversation with a guy in a stupid Facebook group lately where he said, something to the effect of, we're talking about gear. And he said, well, I don't play out. I just play in my bedroom. And I was really tempted and I held back. But I was like, man, you know what? He was talking about tone chasing. And I said, I got more mileage out of what I was looking for by playing stage to stage to stage than I did sitting in the same room in a controlled environment, spending all my hard-earned money on guitars and pedals and amplifiers and cables and swapping out speakers and that kind of stuff. But I've already gone off on a tangent. I apologize. Let me go back. So I'm 18. We're graduating high school, and the school calls and says, Mrs. Hayes, your son is not going to graduate high school. His grades are not good. All hell breaks loose in our house, and everything has to go on hold. So while all the kids were doing morning exams and going to the beach, for the second half of the day, I had to do homework from October, which was super lame, and catch myself up. My graduating class, I believe, was 130 some people, and I was literally in the last 5 to graduate. I was not supposed to graduate. But music, cars, and yes, girls, because I was quite girl crazy, all took precedent over all those things. But I did. I got my degree, diploma. I don't have a degree. Let me make that clear. I got my diploma, and I got out. And at 18, a friend of mine went to Niagara Community College, and he asked me if I wanted to join him and play at their talent show. And I was like, yeah, cool, man. Like hanging out in a college dorm. I've never done that before. All my friends went away to college, and well, I guess I should tell you the story. So as I graduated, I got a job working at a car dealership in my internship at McCarthy Ford. Thank you, Tony McCarthy, if you should ever hear this. Because we still buy all our cars from Tony McCarthy. But I got a job at a car dealership in my internship. I wasn't supposed to, but they hired me. So here I am with this job and making good money, and all my friends are going away to college, and I'm playing, music kind of on the side. So really a cool beginning to my what became my 20s. So sorry, had to backtrack and give you that line. Like I said, we're going to have some growing pains doing this. I apologize for that. So I got asked to do this talent show at Niagara Community College, and because we played together and were kids, there was a compilation CD called No Alternative. And on there was a version of Sexual Healing by Marvin Gaye by Soul Asylum. Now, we always played that in our sets. Again, that's the ladies' man in me. Sorry. And we decided to include that song and an original in this talent show. I can't remember which original. I wish I did. The only reason why I remember this part of the story is what we didn't know is there was a kind of a dance club version of that song that was really popular at the time, and all the college kids were listening to it. So here we go. We come out on this stage with, 2 acoustic guitars and me singing vocals, and I dig right into, Sexual Healing, and the place rips up in a roar. And we had no idea. We're still playing it from the 90s version, And believe it or not, if I remember correctly, we placed. And that one it was like first, second, and third. And we placed. And that night, man, we had such a blast partying in the dorm rooms. It was a lot of fun, man. My grin's gigantic right now. For those of you that can't see me, who could? Nobody can. It's just me and the microphone. So I joined a local band not too long after. I tried putting together another band of my own, and we had a couple of rehearsals, and it just wasn't working. We contacted a booking agent. The booking agent came down and heard us, and then he listened to our demo. And then he eventually said to me, he goes, I've got a band that's looking for a guitar player and a singer. You'd be way better in that, and you'd start working immediately. And that was what I was interested in. So I went and auditioned for that, and I got the audition. I got the part. I was the youngest guy in the band by about 25 years, and this is 1998. So, and the name of that band was called Only Human, which is a very well-known band back home in the area. Although, like I said, 1998. So this band's playing about 4 times a week. And I requested at the car dealership for what was called A shift back then. A shift was 12 hours on Monday, 12 hours on Tuesday, 10 hours on Wednesday, and 10 hours on Thursday. And I had a 1975 Rally Sport Camaro, and I would go to a Thursday night cruise night if I could, if it was that season. Otherwise, the band played on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. Sometimes on Sunday. Usually it was like about 2 Sundays a month or more, maybe. Sometimes, again, depends on the season back in Buffalo, New York. But it was all cover band. It was all cover material. And we played a couple of original songs that the band had written before I joined. And it just wasn't my material at all. We're going to get into that now. So I'm in this local band, and same thing. We're playing all these gigs, and we're doing all these television, local television spots, and it's great, but it's not my vibe. Playing Brown Eyed Girl and Build Me Up Buttercup for the 16 over crowd wasn't my cup of tea. It was okay. I did it actually for 4 years. There's some memorable gigs for good and bad reasons in the process of that. But it wasn't a fruitful thing. And then towards the end of it, I believe in 2000, the owner of the band came to me and said he wanted to record an all original CD, which of course I was into. I hadn't recorded since, that high school recording. And now we're into a whole nother digital platform, and things are, completely different. And he had a recording studio, and we decided to do this recording, which was in very low print in very low circulation. And I contributed, I believe, 4 songs to that 10-song CD. The name of that CD is called Slightly Twisted Fiction. And he would come to me with his songs and kind of tell me, here's what I want it to sound like, and here's what I want to do with it. And I want this to kind of have a Matchbox 20 thing, and I want this to have and it just felt contrived to me. I didn't like it at all. And he was a big Beatles nut. I'm not a big Beatles nut. As a matter of fact, much like Stevie Ray and my dad, where it was force fed all my life, the whole baby boomer generation has force fed the next generation, the Beatles, so much so that some of us just can't hang, And I'm not taking anything away from them at all. It's just not my gig. I don't get anything from it. I respect it wholeheartedly. But he'd come to me with a song. He'd say, I want this to sound like Anya Bird Can Sing. And I want this to sound like such and such. And I'm like, man, these were like kind of very fundamental, rudimentary, major, minors, and 7 chord songs. There were, only a couple of fancy lyrics away from being a John Denver song. So, and I had these a little, my arrangements and my chords, everything was a little different. And there's a bunch of stuff that I'm leaving out. Even just now, I'm like, I forgot to mention this and I forgot to mention that. But the most important part of this is where we need to arrive. And if you've made it this far, I'll say exactly what I said on the first podcast. Thank you. PODCASTY. Correct myself. If you've made it this far, thank you. But the thing that I realized in that moment, kind of held up in those recordings, in that recording studio with no light, no windows, and eating bad food, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. The thing I realized at that point was that I still had something with music that other people didn't have, the people around me at that time. And I'm still kind of looking for those people. And like it was my way of speaking. It was my way of expressing myself. And it was a way of depleting my emotions. And that's kind of what I said earlier on yesterday's episode about I'm using this in place of therapy because I don't go out on stage 4 nights a week and get my therapy. I don't go out and just give all my emotions away, everything I went through, from the guy that cut me off in traffic right into, the time that I didn't get the red bicycle that I wanted on Christmas. Yeah. It's a way of expressing myself. And I didn't like the industry, and I didn't like the hustle, and I didn't like the dodge. I didn't do it for girls. One of the things that the owner of that band used to say all the time, and it's sad that it stuck with me, man, and I try to correct myself from saying it as often as I want, as often as I can, but he would say, we don't get, Blue Cross and Blue Shield. So, and that was his way of saying, take all the drinks, take all the women, take all the drugs, take whatever you can get tonight. Take all the food, the free food, see if they'll give you something to eat on the way home, whatever it is. I didn't like that. That's not why I got in the industry. That's not why I performed. That's not why I played. So when I heard those songs, I knew it wasn't for me. So we did a couple of weird TV spots. At one time we played in the mall, and I remember just thinking to myself, oh God, this sucks. I'm like literally playing, across from Payless Shoes or something. It's like, this is not where I want to be. And of course now I'm on TV. I'm going to go ahead and pass. So I put in my notice as it was. And I decided at that point in 2002 that I was going to go out under my own name as, air quotes, Mick Hayes. And my first gig as Mick Hayes was on January 25th in 2003. And I'll never forget this because the place was packed. And the best feeling was walking on stage knowing that many people I had encountered from day one to today, which, again was back then, had waited for me to do my own thing so they could see it and support it. And we didn't even have, back then it was 3-hour gigs. We didn't have 3 hours of material. I think we had maybe 10 original songs. So we had to kind of, play the room. I'll never forget the freeing feeling But I got to give you the sad part of it. And the sad part of it is this. Right around that time, as I was working at the car dealerships still, I got an opportunity to leave the dealership I was at and go work at another car dealership for more money. And I took the bait. I took the bait, and I went out, like, even did my urine test and all that stuff in my 2-week notice. And the owner of that car dealership the one I was working at, came to me, and he said, "Whatever they're offering you, we'll match it. We can't lose you." And I was like, well, I'd rather stay here with everybody that I know, so thank you. So they matched the offer, and then it wasn't even 6 months later, they came to me and said, "We can no longer afford you, and we have to let you go." And I was fractured. I'd worked a day job since I was 16 years old. And I had worked, I had played out for fun, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was, still very young and impressionable, so to speak. But the only person I knew that I could talk to about this, the only person I could think of, not that I knew, that I could talk to about this was my dear old dad, who was Mr. Blue Collar himself, loved the blues and played guitar and all that stuff. And my dad and I had developed a very strange dynamic in my teens. It's funny, it was this very specific moment where he was playing, I was playing, and I would see him only, like I said, on Saturdays, sometimes on Sundays. And I started to notice his guitars were gathering dust, or sitting over in the corner there. And I was like, hey, he's not playing them anymore. And then the one day I picked it up, and I just started playing ZZ Top. Just Got Back from Babies, off the first album, specifically side 2, if you play the vinyl, as you should. And he heard me playing it. He goes, "Show me how to do that." And I started showing him a couple things, and it was really kind of a fruitful moment, and cool father-son thing. And then for some reason, he realized that I was teaching him something, and he reared back, and that was it. He put the guitar down and walked away, lit up a cigarette, and never said a thing. And sadly, I never watched him play guitar again, ever. So here I am. I had lost my job. We're talking about very early cell phone era, green screen, singular wireless. And I called my dad, and I told him what happened. And I was crying. I don't know quite what to make of it. And him not knowing the right thing to say at all, ever, said to me, "Well, you're not moving in with me." And that's all he could think of, And he just continued to no, I'm not going to fix your problems. And that wasn't what I was looking for. I had savings. I had my own place. I had everything. I just wanted advice. I wanted parental advice. I wanted someone to give me here's what you need to do. So I didn't have it. And I didn't get another job. I started working on my own right away. And that is where we will pick up the next episode on going professional. I think that it's going to help anybody who's kind of wondering, when do you take the leap? When do you jump off? And how do I do it? So as I put in the last episode, I want to give you guys a takeaway. And my takeaway is, it's slanted. It's a little soapboxy. But the first thing I'll say is, if you believe in yourself and you have a passion, follow that passion as long as you can. And one day decide if your passion is a hobby or a career. It's weird because mine blurs. It is a hobby and it is a career. For me, listening to music has now become my hobby. I don't prefer studying music. I prefer being influenced by music. That part of it is my hobby. Performing, hopefully one day very soon again, and being a part of the industry is my career. And then my next soapboxy moment is, if you have young ones around you, take the cell phone away from them, give them an instrument, and give them a chance with an instrument. That's it. That's all I've got to say. So I hope that this helps you. I hope it entertains you. And I hope that it draws me closer to you.